because at the end of the day, if your team isn't where they need to be emotionally, physically, like mentally, you can't produce anything, or at least have results where you want them to be.
The voice you just heard was one of my students from this past semester. Did she just say students? I sure did. This past year, I started teaching at Temple University, so while I'll always be MG the venue specialist, I'm really enjoying my role as Professor MG. As a project for my leadership and organizations class, the students paired up to record a short podcast about what they've enjoyed and learned in class so far, incorporating the role of emotional intelligence in their lives. With the students' permission to use their project for this season, I've broken down each recording into bite-sized clips. This week, I'm joined by Liz Einhorn, founder of Experience Threee, a hospitality growth consulting firm. We'll listen to the clips and carry on the conversation started by my students, Caroline and Sara. If you're looking to gain insight into how to work efficiently in a team, as well as fun things to do in New Orleans, you're in the right place. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the following episode, Leadership and Hospitality 301. Don't be late to class. Class is back in session. I am Professor MG, joined today by my friend Liz Einhorn, founder of Experience Threee, a hospitality growth consulting firm, and a guest from season 2 of Beyond the Venue podcast. Very excited to have you back on the show, Liz.
I'm very excited to be back myself. Thank you. Thanks for having me again. Thrilled to kick off season 3 with Three.
Yay! So if you could tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, and I'd also love to hear a couple juicy tidbits. You just returned from New Orleans. I've been joking we could probably host an entire, not even an episode. I feel like I could do an entire season surrounding New Orleans. Philly loves New Orleans. So welcome back. And
Thank you so much. And I am just thrilled to be here and excited to interact with you and your students. I am a growth strategist based here in Philadelphia. I worked for the Boston Beer Company, which most people know for Sam Adams, Angry Orchard, and Truly, for 10 years prior to starting my own firm, Experience Threee, 5 years ago this spring. And we work with brands and organizations across the country, primarily in the beverage, hospitality, and aviation space. And we use our signature motto and framework of explore, educate, engage to help kind of really get into the nitty-gritty of where clients' opportunities are for sales, marketing, audience outreach, and what growth looks like for them. I am really honored and humbled. I was selected as this year's Fine Spirits Legacy Award recipient through La Dame Escoffier and
congratulations,
the Child Foundation. Thank you. It's really an incredible honor, and I'm in great company. The other recipients, there are 6 categories, 1 winner for each, all in different aspects of hospitality. So I was part of the beverage and fine spirits, as I mentioned. My host is an incredible person, and just was literally the host with the most. Her name's Krista Cotton. She is the owner of El Guapo, a New Orleans beverage company. They make non-alcoholic bitters, mixers, syrups. So she's somebody who, I sincerely value the power of relationships and networking. And I'm just lucky to say that not only was it great to receive the award, but I think she's somebody who I will have as both a personal and professional contact and moving forward. So I'm really pumped about that and trying to get her stuff in airports. So, it works both ways. And I think that 10 days in New Orleans in July is an experience. You have to bring an umbrella, and I had a fan and a lot of patience.
And it's hot. It's hot.
You can cut through, and I have to credit Susanna Morrow, who was also down for, in addition to the Legacy Award, I'd be remiss to not mention, it worked out, it was the 20-year anniversary for the Tales of the Cocktail Conference, which is an incredible beverage-based conference that takes place in New Orleans every year. So it was their first time coming back in light of everything with COVID. So there was a lot of, folks were really excited to be together in person. And our friend Susanna, who works with Pellegrino and Nestle, she was down. And she described it as you could cut through the air with a snorkel, like you needed a snorkel to get through the humidity, which I then coined and utilized also all week, but I want to give proper credit where credit is due. But
I'm
ate a
glad you
lot,
had such
drank
a great
lot.
time. Yeah, I saw a bunch of
Yeah.
pictures on Instagram and, had the pleasure of returning there this past March for my 40th birthday. And
You gave me some great tips.
I gave you some great tips.
Great tips.
And, shout out to Nick Macri, who's now the head chef at Khyber Pass Pub, who gave me a bunch of tips. Christine Fisher, guest from season 1 of Beyond the Venue, is moving there.
I know. I was so bummed. I was so bummed that we were sliding doors, ships in the night of missing one another, but we need to go back down and visit her.
Reason to go back. So
absolutely.
The joke was, the cost of flights to get between Philadelphia and New Orleans are completely asinine. And unless you're doing some sort of like Frontier Spirit issue, which I don't mess around with that because you get what you pay for. And I don't trust it. So if we could just come up with a affordable airline, like a Southwest Airlines customer service level, low fare, like just between Philadelphia and New Orleans. That is all in the speech.
One route,
back and forth. I feel like
I have to tell you something. So
you're like, oh, I work with airports. You're like, I'm already working on this. It's
my dream, my first priority. And airlines, if you're out there, if you are listening, I am here. I am ready. I have logistics set to go. Hear me? Family flights. I think there should be family specific flights, probably to Orlando, just to Disney World. Families can sign up. You can have special snacks for the kids. You can take care of allergens. You can have Disney sponsor it. There's a million revenue streams you could do, and just family. And then I would, in turn, like a business flight, like Amtrak, like a quiet car, because I'm a very social person. But on the plane, I have no interest in talking to you ever.
That's why the headphones go in. It's
that's the goal. But going back, I also have some hesitancy with some of the other carriers. But I will say, last minute, I have, I think we all have several friends that I get to work with professionally. But personally, one of my dear friends, she's a legit foodie. She loves the space. She kind of works hospitality adjacent. Marissa Magnato, who's, part of WMMR and also is the Delicious City podcast here with Eli Kolp and Sarah Miliano. She last minute was like, hey, I'm on vacation from the radio station. We planned this wrong. I should come down. And I had a little more free time than I had initially anticipated. And I was like, if you're down to network and kind of explore with me, come on down. So she, God bless her, flew in Tuesday night, left Friday morning, booked her flight the day before, flew on Spirit for really cheap. And I was like, well, we'll see if you get here. And she did. It worked out. It was great.
It's roll the dice.
And then it was she's come with me to nightclub and bar. She met me in Italy. Like, I love bring Marissa to work day. It's great.
Well, speaking of hospitality, we're going to jump right into our first clip. Our student group that we're paired with today, two of my students, Caroline and Sara, that I was lucky enough to have in both of my classes this past semester. They both have spent, had worked several jobs within the hospitality industry. So I thought it was very relatable to both you and I being hospitality professionals.
Awesome. I can't wait are they going to be joining us as well?
Nope. I'll be playing a clip. These are pre-recorded. So as part of an assignment that I had given the students for my leadership and organization class. So this was a pre-recorded project.
My name is Sarah Lenny. I am a senior at Temple for adult organizational development and waiting on my application decision for a master's degree in counseling psychology. So crossing fingers for there. And then Caroline, what is your introduction for today?
I am a junior at Temple. I'm also in the adult and organizational development major. I have 1 year left at Temple, kind of terrified about that. Don't really know where I'm heading, but you know what? This life is a journey, and here we are, taking it day by day.
Awesome. Well, you do have something to look forward to because you're going on that trip in, is it May for?
Yeah, I'm going to LA for school for 2 weeks. I'm so excited. LA is like my dream spot to be. So I'll be out there learning about the children's media industry, I'm super into like pop culture, so I'm really excited to get to meet with executives and discuss really what's going on in the industry.
It's going to be really cool. I guess with that, we can jump right into our first topic, which is discussing our TED Talk from class, why good leaders make you feel safe. How do you feel about the leadership that you've learned so far and how it relates to that TED Talk?
So with leadership, I don't really take on any specific leadership roles in my daily life. However, I do find myself being a situational leader and taking on responsibility and action where I can and when I can. Like I work in a restaurant right now, so it's a pretty small restaurant. Like as far as who I work with, we have a small team, so we're all trying to work together. And the biggest thing that I took away from this TED Talk was that great leaders do not sacrifice their people for numbers, and that's certainly where I try to fit myself in as a leader. I try to like ensure that my team is thriving before I look at how well we're producing, because at the end of the day, if your team isn't where they need to be emotionally, physically, like mentally, you can't produce anything, or at least have results where you want them to be.
Thank you, Caroline and Sarah. So I am going to offer a little bit of backstory for our listeners. So the restaurant where Caroline works, I actually just attended a wedding there this past weekend and was able to chat with her in person. And I got to ask her about LA. She said it was absolutely amazing, very transformative experience. So just very excited to see what's next for her and what she ends up doing after she graduates next year. And then the TED Talk that they reference in the speech, every week I would find a TED Talk clip for my leadership and organizations class. So some sort of TED Talk that was relevant to the topic at hand. And so Sarah referenced Simon Sinek's Why Good Leaders Make You Feel Safe. And we'll share a link to that YouTube clip in this episode's show notes. But one of the key points from this specific TED Talk was if you get the environment right, people will do remarkable things. And so, Liz, the title of your episode from season 2 was Mental Health, Mentorship, and Maintaining Relationships, the Important 3 M's, which again, very excellent episode. We had a wonderful conversation. So I want to bring this full circle with the concept, if you get the environment right, people will do remarkable things. You've shared with me that you're passionate about fighting for equal pay and rights for women and minorities, as well as helping fellow women business owners grow and navigate their entrepreneurial efforts. Can you speak about your participation within the Airport Minority Advisory Council and how you try to get the environment right as a leader in the airport and beverage industry?
Sure. So AMAC is an incredible organization. Again, AMAC is the Airport Minority Advisory Council. They're out of Washington, D.C. They work with businesses nationally and advocate and lobby for participation for what are ACDBEs, Airport Concession Disadvantaged Business Enterprises, to have a voice, have a say, have a space, literally, figuratively, in the airport environment. Historically, there are prime concessionaires who had the majority of concessions, both retail and food and beverage, and they were larger organizations. So each airport, everyone is different, but there are now requirements for ACDBE participation, which is awesome, right? This is all a step in the right direction and things to help the environment in the airports. Concurrently in airports, and I know we're going to speak to some travel that I've done, the airports themselves are really shifting in terms of the traveler experience and what concepts are there. You know, it's not just a hockey puck hamburger anymore. You can get a first class, meal and experience. And there's two things that I see as opportunities. One, I want to see beverage in general kind of meet up to where food is. I want there to be continued focus and growth to expand beverage offerings and really have unique beverage opportunities, both distribution and concepts in the airport. And part of that is I'm very passionate about helping women and minority owned businesses get a seat at the table, literally. There's something to be said for it's not easy to operate or work in an airport environment, especially the last 2 to 3 years. And there's been challenges with procurement, but helping, barriers to entry, such as helping these businesses get introduced to the right concessionaires, to the right decision maker, understanding what their production capabilities are and making sure they're being set up for success. So it's not just, hey, checking the box, you're getting in, but it's you're getting in the right way, your product's being promoted the right way, it doesn't need to be refrigerated, how should it be presented, what are proper price points, all of that stuff, and helping folks navigate and just connecting point A to point B. It's really exciting for me, whether it's a personal introduction or it's a professional thing that I'm working on, to be that conduit. And because I think the airport space is often overlooked, and it's such, to me, from both a distribution opportunity, but also it's like an interactive billboard. It's a really great way for people to see these brands and for folks to share their stories. So anything, myself or Three can do to help those brands and open up doors through relationships I've built and my understanding of the industry, it's something my team and I are really excited about.
Can I share with you a personal story? I unfortunately have not had a Bud and Maryland's Frosé at all this season. I really need to rectify that. I was supposed to have one. I flew to Atlanta to visit some friends over Memorial Day weekend, and I wanted to make sure I was getting there early enough because of you're hearing the stories, and it was Memorial Day weekend. So
Absolutely.
Got there super early with the sole intention of heading straight to the BC connector, right to Bud and Maryland's. And wouldn't you know it, they were closed for renovations. And,
they're reopened though.
Well, it doesn't help
They
me.
are. I was messaging.
I'm not flying out of Philly anytime soon.
I'm so excited. I was messaging with Marcy and Valerie. I was DMing them on Instagram when I was in New Orleans. I was like, I'm so pumped you guys are back.
I was devastated, so I went straight to Vino Volo and had a couple beverages there.
I'm always going to. Vino Volo is a trusted client and dear friend of Experience Threee, so appreciate it.
I really appreciate their approach and the way they do business.
So again, talking about like innovation and excitement in airports, Vino Volo, for those that aren't familiar, is a wine focused bar, but over the last, as everyone's pivoted, they've really been expanding their concept, and they have local beer offerings. They're doing more cocktails. I mean, in Philly, I know they have like Philly Brewing Company, which I think is really exciting. Like I think that there's this misconception that the airports are always the same thing, and they're not.
All right, we're going to jump into the next clip.
Especially in a service industry, you have to think about the team sometimes, and other times you're thinking of yourself, but it's still teamwork. Like, talking about that TED Talk where he's saying you're not sacrificing people for numbers. When there's like slow days as servers, oftentimes you say like, all right, let's get somebody cut so that I can make more money. And that is exactly what he's talking about. Like everyone could make a little bit of money, or one or two people can make more money. And it's like, what is the bottom line in the industry that you're in? Sometimes people will want to get cut and go home because whatever they have at home is more important than the maybe $50 that you're going to make that night. And that's definitely true sometimes, but you have to really be able to understand what the other people want, even just if it's asking them if you're not quite sure, like using that emotional intelligence to kind of roll it all in together.
Yeah, also thinking beyond yourself and what is best for the group. I find that happens a lot in the service industry. Like even at my work right now, we still, 2 years into the pandemic, we're still pooling tips. And at the end of the night, all the servers still walk home with the same amount of money because our business doesn't support everyone taking home their own amount of tips. So you definitely have to make sacrifices right now, and learning to deal with this new normal is something that I'm certainly struggling with. How do you feel about navigating COVID, and especially as it relates to your work in the service industry?
we just had to pay attention to how people were coming in and how they presented themselves and like their nonverbal communication and how they like were they really going through something. And sometimes it was teachers would talk to us for like 15 minutes at the bar and bar service wasn't allowed, so be like, oh, but you can't take your mask off and have a sip while you're hanging out with us, you have to go outside to do that, or you have to sit down, and all sorts of those rules. But then we would also feel bad for these teachers who are like, here's an extra glass of wine and like, don't worry about it. And we had that freedom from our boss being so like, I guess, Liz fair. He'd rather someone was happy than charge them for a glass of wine, even though it's vineyard. So we're very lucky. Hopefully other people have some good stories about some of the service industry, but I'm definitely a lucky one.
I would consider myself a lucky one as well. I've worked at 2 different restaurants during the pandemic, and at the start, I worked at a place that was really like we were really strict with following the rules at the beginning because everything was so intense, and so I definitely struggled, like you said, navigating that. How do you approach someone about wearing their mask properly, but also not upsetting them? And because it's a very touchy subject, especially depending on where you are located. And so we began to push more towards management, just having to police that at the door to like prevent any
altercations,
serious interactions.
So listeners, I do want to share a couple definitions that Caroline and Sara dropped in this clip. So the concept of getting cut, if you've ever waited tables before, managers will systematically decide. So let's say you're starting with 5 servers for the evening, but it's a slower night than anticipated. Getting cut just means sending the server home for the night. And then pooling tips is another concept. Some people, you have your specific section and those are the tips that you make for yourself at the end of the night, or the concept of pooled tips in which everybody that's working that evening, all the money goes into a pool and is equally distributed amongst the staff. So, it just depends on the establishment as to which style they go with. And it's, the struggle has been real of getting customers to follow the rules. And it sounds like they had a relatively easy job, but at the same time, hearing Sara talk about, teacher just wants to have a glass of wine at the bar. And it's like, man, I forgot that we went back that far of like how intense the rules were, but only I forget about that because I wasn't going out at the time. Like I didn't see the purpose of indoor dining even when it was allowed, like before I was vaccinated. And, I think it was August by the time I physically went to a restaurant, like August of 2020, where we sat outside at American Sardine Bar, because I wasn't ready. So even though I was communicating all of these rules from, an event perspective, I was unwilling to take those risks. So Liz, my question for you. So, we know that the service and hospitality industry has been completely rocked over the last few years. We've heard stories on the news of how awful customers were to their fellow human beings, and we know the industry has really taken a hit with people not wanting to return. What are some of your thoughts and insights on the current state of the hospitality industry?
From what perspective? Like beyond my own, obviously, but in terms of how we support clients that are trying to gain new customers, just in general as a consumer myself, like
probably more from a consumer standpoint. What's your experience as you've been like going back out, spending time in bars and restaurants once again? I know from my personal experience, I feel like, some places you could definitely tell when they're understaffed. Some places are like the food quality isn't where it used to be before the pandemic. And it could be because of, whether it's like lack of staff in the kitchen, things just aren't, the consistency isn't there like it used to be before. So I don't, what's, I guess more from a personal experience.
Okay. I think there's a lot of things. So, and thank you for that clarification.
Of course.
So first and foremost, patience is crucial.
Absolutely.
And I will actually refer back to just spending 10 days in New Orleans because something, and I've been lucky enough, this was my fifth or sixth time, excuse me, in New Orleans. And I love it there very, very much. I think it's a very special place. It is a very different pace than Philadelphia or being in a big city, right? When you are in a big city, everything's moving so fast and the consumer wants things immediately, myself included. I remember there was a cute coffee shop by my hotel and I went and I ordered a pour over and it was taking 20 minutes. And at first, admittedly, I felt frustration and annoyance. And then it ended up blossoming into, I had a phenomenal conversation with the barista. He recommended what was my best bite of the trip, which for those interested was a Creole tomato sandwich that I added bacon to. That was spectacular at Rabbit's Foot in New Orleans. But getting back on track, I mean, I think that it's, again, just a lesson that we all need to be kind to each other, kind and understanding. Because yes, as a consumer, like if you have a negative experience, I would encourage and implore people to think about what degree of negative it was. Like if there is, I don't want to just say, hey, you can get, if you had a dish that you'd ordered from a restaurant that you've gone to for gazillions of years and it used to have 6 scallops and now it has 3 scallops, and is double the price. There's something to think about, but at the same time, you do need to, I look at it with a more of a critical eye because I understand on the back end inflation and supply chain issues and things like that and staffing challenges. But I also just think that we can be patient and kind with each other. And I think of, middle child has always had the philosophy of like, the customer is not always right, but also we're not always right. So let's work together. And that's something that I'd like to see more organizations really embody. I want to continue to support and help hospitality always. I mean, that you and I both were both very conservative. I'm going to dinner tonight because I traveled last week. Like, even though it's hot out, I said, let's eat outside. I mean, I've tested and I'm negative and all that great stuff, but I still think it's something for the safety of those that I'm dining with and, for the restaurant workers and stuff themselves. Like, I can eat outside. It's not, it's something to think about. And it's not I think that people are really quick to judge, and both as consumers and I'm sorry, but the reviews and the Yelp, and you hear these horror stories about how people are going on and just doing negative reviews for the hope of getting a gift card. I'm like,
oh, it's heartbreaking.
Really? Like, do you want to put, your favorite restaurant, you're sad when it closes? Well, there's ways to support. If you're not comfortable eating there's a lot of places that have done pickup, that have done gift cards. Like, there's ways to support them, or share, social media, like share a post of, if somebody's doing a special and it looks good to you, share it on your network to your followers. Maybe it encourages somebody to go. There's ways to support places. And I think the hospitality has always been a challenging environment, and now the challenges are paramount. And it's like I brought up that scallop example and then I feel like a jerk that I brought.
But I think you're right about how we need to approach it with patience and kindness. And if you have to make a decision for yourself of, is this worth my time and my money? And
sure.
If it no longer aligns with you, then you move on, because there are countless options out there that, it's amazing to see how many new restaurants are still popping up, this year. And I am honestly very surprised as to how many places did not close that they were able to sustain through over these last couple of years, which I think is amazing. But it is heartbreaking to see this kind of mass exodus of staff. And so all of these places are having staffing issues. But at the same time, they are getting more creative with like their hours. So a lot of places, like props to Little Fish, and I hope that things are going well with them. I need to get in there, but making that decision to only be, yes, and making the decision to only be open Monday through Friday when you're a fancier seafood restaurant in, a hip neighborhood in Philadelphia, that, deciding to give your staff the weekend off to actually go out themselves on a weekend is unheard of in our hospitality industry.
Jen and the team at Juana Tamale, she's done that.
Yep.
Judy and Andy from Biology, like they're open Tuesday to Friday now, I believe. Like their Mondays they do prep stuff and weekends they're off. But they're incredible, advocates for the community and for their team. They kept their team there the whole time. They just opened a couple weeks ago for the first time indoor dining in over 2 years.
And it's rewriting the rules based on what's going to work for your business, your staff, and taking care of your team. And I think it's great. It's this COVID has forced a huge shift, and I think we're going to continue to see more of it.
And I hope we do. I hope that we continue to see people be kind to each other and take care of each other. And I will say, I'd be remiss not mention, I value eating out now so much more. There's things that we took for granted beforehand. I was, I'm in restaurants constantly, personally and professionally, but there's something to, because for health concerns and things like that, and having direct family members who are immunocompromised, I had to really shift how I socialized at restaurants. And so now when I do have the opportunity to go, I treat it's a gift. It's important to get to go, and I'm excited to be there, and I want to support the staff and the team that's there. Wait, I also just have to say my cousins Hillary and Mike got engaged at Little Fish, and if she didn't hear me reference that, I would be in trouble. So wonderful. They have 2 beautiful children now. Excellent.
All right, we're going to jump into our next clip.
What about that project we both finished up on? Do you want to tell everyone a bit about that Teams project? We both had a little bit of experience about that ties into our leadership.
For sure. I think we both had similar but slightly different experiences with the Teams project. So we both had to, in our separate teams, come up with a board game. You could base it off of something else, but it shouldn't be an explicit copy. Creating this board game, I feel like I should have taken the initiative to be the leader and divide things into or divide people into roles so that it was clear and objective what every person was doing. Instead, we just showed up every day, and most of us showed up every day, and we just kind of were like, well, does anyone have anything? No. All right. Well, I guess this is what I have, and I would kind of try and do something with it. And I need feedback in everything that I do, and I wasn't really getting anything. It was just like, oh, well, sure. And that just didn't make anything go by very well. How did it go for you?
Yeah, I feel like my group also had that. We struggled to come up with an idea. We also had issues with people showing up. So trying to get a hold of everyone, get everyone in the same space at once, and get their creative juices flowing, for a lack of better words, was extremely difficult. One day it was only half of us there, so it ended up being just one other person and I, and we were both a bit on the more of, we wanted to work on the logistics part of the project, and we were hoping that the other half of the team would bring more of the creative aspect, and that idea went right out the window as soon as Thursday came along, and only us 2 showed up. So we had to come up with an idea on the fly that I think could have been more thought out. We both weren't necessarily the happiest with it. We were just kind of going with something just to get something going at that point and to hurry the process along. So I kind of wish we had more time to be together and to get that brainstorming going.
It's funny because we learn about this all semester about how you can form a good team, different types of teams, and how people work together positively and negatively. And all of that just kind of went out the window when it was okay, all of you guys do this. Because in most group projects for school, it's all right, well, you're either doing it or you're not doing it, and someone's going to do it because someone cares the most. And I guess that person in my group right now. We did complete the project, but I think that it was a little bit of a struggle bus for a while. We had not many ideas, which was disappointing. I think it was like supposed to be a fun project, but we were all overthinking it and believing that when we had less constraints to the project, where we have to just simply be creative and do whatever we want. It's like in school, you're taught to do this, and this. And if you do all those things, then you get an A. And when it's more, do something like this, but like figure it out, everyone freaks out, and you really need a little bit of that guidance. And I don't think anyone really wanted to step up to the plate because no one wanted to be mean.
I love that Sarah names the fact that we learned all of these things, of how to work in a team together. And then I put them in a team together and they just fall flat on their face. So to give you some backstory for the two classes I was teaching, leadership and organizations, and then the second class was team processes and education. And it was a relatively small class. And for one of their major assignments, I had them create a board game. And so they were able to pull inspiration from everywhere. So I was bringing board games to class and having them kind of rotate through to get some inspiration. And they were required to make a video of like kind of, how like complicated games have YouTube videos of someone explaining like how the game works. So they were supposed to make about a 15-minute video and then write a manual on how to play the game. And there are 4 different groups, and how each of the groups showed up was so diverse. Caroline speaks to the fact that it was just her and another teammate that came to class that day, that the other 2 teammates, so the day that they were supposed to start brainstorming about what their board game was going to be, only half the team was there. And so I, tried to help, and they're both very introverted. And so I, as the professor, wanted to help them. And so I kind of sat in as the ghost team member to kind of help give them some different directions they could go, or kind of do some exercises with them to help with the creativity. And all semester long, I would just remind the students that you will never stop working in teams. You are always, these last couple of years have been the worst group project of all time. And, I know that it's hard. And so what's been super helpful for me is now that I've gone through this experience of having taught these 2 classes, now I know that, okay, we're going to do this board game project for your final project. Now I can more efficiently build the lesson plan out. So now we have the building blocks, and I'm kind of relating it to the final project, as opposed to, the fact that was due 2/3 of the way into the semester. And I came up with the idea 1/3 of the way in the semester, after the syllabus was already complete. So very excited to see how much better my students perform this coming semester. So I'm kind of curious, Liz, speaking of working in teams, with your clients, is it a team effort, or are you taking more of a leadership role when you're working with them?
So, great question. I mean, obviously it really varies by client in terms of what our scope is and what the engagement entails. I also think in terms of, so there's the client dynamic, and then there's Three. So to just give a little more insight, if I may, about how I've structured Three and how I've grown Three over the last 5 years, is so as Three was growing and I was growing the business, I'm one person. There's often I feel as though I'm doing the work of 17 people, but I'm
no surprise there.
Thank you. Thank you. And also, but it's important to build a team. So currently internally at Three, and I don't know if you know this, but I have a team of 12 that works for me across the country. They're all not necessarily active all at once because, again, it's kind of the nature of there's some clients we're on retainer with, there's some that are more on a project basis, but and I promise this will lend itself to your question. I talked about the Explore, Educate, Engage framework that we use, and that's to approach growth both internally and externally. Internally on the client side, making sure all the stakeholders that need to be involved that sales is talking to marketing, is talking to operations, that individuals aren't working in silos, and it is a collaborative effort because you know what really helps growth? When people talk to each other and communicate. So I build out teams because I'm self-aware enough to recognize that I can't do everything. That's not a sustainable business model. And as I'm building out Three as an entity and, advancing, looking at both our short-term and long-term pipeline of the clients and customers that we work with, being able to support all of them, I have to grow myself, right? So within the team, and I took notes while I was listening, to the clip as they were talking about the project. And to me, I wrote in bold boundary setting and process management.
Yeah.
Because I think it's, with the team, I really do stand by this too. I like to say that my team works with me, not for me. Because sometimes I think as a leader, sometimes the best thing you can do is know where to follow. And so understanding, as I work with the clients and we're building out strategy for them, I'm very intentional with the teams that we build, and we really tailor to but we tailor and curate based on what the client need is. And I'm sorry, I can't go too much into it. It's just the bulk of our contracts are NDA, but
non-disclosure agreements.
The nature of management consulting, right?
Absolutely.
But I think it's my responsibility as a leader of the organization, as much as I embody and want to embrace teamwork first. You do sometimes naturally, just for the order of things, for efficiency purposes, to streamline, you need a decision maker. You need somebody that's at the top and that can make things happen and can delegate and communicate appropriately. But it's my responsibility as a leader to understand, where my team shines and understand and applying their strength and capabilities to our clients' objectives and growth needs. So full circle, how do we work with the clients? And is it more team? To an extent, we're an extension of their team. I pride, the Three framework on providing both, strategy and implementation. So often you have consultants who come in and they're just okay, here's the strategy, bye. And that's against everything I stand for. I want it to be, thoughtful and scalable and impactful, that they can, if I've done my job well, it then becomes part of their framework and their process and how they build and grow, So to that vein, does that help answer, at the end of the day, yes, we work as part of their team. Yes. Alternatively, it can be something where they can just straight up develop it or delegate it to us. But they're always communicated, and we always, I'm not going to just go in and be wah, wah, here you go.
Here's the plan. So it seems, I think that, with my understanding, it seems like it is, you are kind of working together as a team with your client, but at the same time, you're still being they hired you to be a leader and a decision maker to help shift the company around so it can be the best that they can possibly be. I am curious as a follow-up question, series talking about workplace culture.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel Experience Threee workplace culture and ethic gets infused into these companies, or do you feel it was always kind of there to begin with and you're just kind of helping them blossom? And I'm sure you have so many different clients that I'm sure it's different for all of them, but do you feel you see a culture shift, or is it you've worked with too many people that it's been too different?
A culture shift in the sense of so for Experience, in terms of culture at Experience Threee, what I try to cultivate is I talked about, very transparent, very I want, I onboarded in the last couple of months one of the newer contractors that I'm working with. She's fantastic. And she's 25. She's green. She has a lot of runway. But it's so exciting for me because she's really excited to learn and grow. and it's creating and cultivating an environment where she can come into her own, and she's maybe not as social or outgoing as you and I. So it's being sensitive to that and making sure that I use language and have like situations with clients where she feels comfortable. And it's been, we're kind of past that 90-day period, and she's just blossoming in a way that I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to watch other people be the smartest person in the room and learn from them and watch them grow. And it's really exciting. And I think I try to, work with clients who also really value their people and their relationships and are respectful with their vendors. A luxury that I have 5 years in now is there have been client situations where, there's been challenges with communication or invoices being delayed or things like that. And I terminated those relationships. There's something.
And that's a big thing we talk about in the well-struck community is when you're at a place in your business that you have the ability to break up with a client, to say no to a client that does not align with your values. And so it sounds like so I guess it kind of answering my own question that it sounds like the way that you're choosing to work with your clients, there already is some alignment there with values and with culture. So
totally. And I also think like there's some projects where there was a recent project where I came on for the first 6 months of the engagement. We're transitioning now. I'm actually transitioning into an equity advisor, which is really exciting. But I was their interim CMO and
Chief Marketing Officer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So it was coming in, understanding that I was taking on an interim position, and then that we'd be doing that to scale. And then it's actually worked out that on a personal level, I'm now an equity advisor with that organization, which is really exciting. But alternatively, it's a beverage brand. They're also using Experience Threee to do all of their social media strategy and engagement. So I have a member from my team who she's lead on the account. I help out with the strategy as well. So it's really cool to kind of be involved with the brand on multiple levels. There is it's actually the same client, but one of the reasons why I love working with them so much is it's two friends who met at Wharton together who developed this beverage company, and just the way that the care that they take for each other, they're really respectful of each other and they really value each other's opinions. We were debating which PR firm to hire, and the one even had in the subject line to the other, if you haven't made up your mind yet, don't read this email, which was just so endearing and wonderful. And I remember that night, like going to bed and being like, this is why I have my own thing, because I get to, just work with people that inspire me. It's not, I think the best dynamics and relationships are not just having team members that I can teach stuff to, they can teach me things, and not just having clients that, I get paid for my brain, but I also want to learn from them just as much as I instill to them. Does that make sense?
110%, because that's exactly how I am with teaching. I mean, I'm finally getting to share some of these, brilliant voices with the world. But the way that these students have inspired me and taught me this past semester, I'm just very excited to be a part of it and see how the journey goes.
Totally. And, both my parents are owls, both undergrad and grad. And my Aunt Lisa, who's like my second mom, also went to Temple. So we are definitely a supportive Temple family. So I'm pumped to tell them about this.
Awesome. Well, that segues into our next clip. We're going to talk a little bit about creativity.
But I think the biggest problem with, it goes back to in school, we're taught from such a young age, almost depend on the teacher for guidance. And as you get older, you're expected to become more independent and be able to guide yourself. And I think that in my personal life, I can do really well with that, but I still am so used to having the teacher tell me what to do next and lay out exactly what they want, which is where I struggle when it comes to projects like this.
Yeah. I don't know if you watched it. I think it was in this class where there was actually no, it might have been practical applications, but it was a TED talk of this British guy, and he was talking about people are taught out of their creativity in school, and that's kind of what we're saying as well. Like you learn definitions, you memorize, but you don't learn how to apply and create your own. And like when you're going through this process of learning, memorizing and understanding are the first parts of it. But if you can't apply it, then you really don't understand it. You mostly just have memorized it. And I feel like that is one of like the biggest problems with American education. You're just memorizing things, and then, all right, what do I do next? Like this is not relevant to the rest of my classwork or my school, or not school, but like my personal life.
I feel like it was schools kill creativity.
I think so, yeah.
Something along the lines of that was the TED Talk. It was a really interesting listen, and I think that's come up in a couple different of my classes within this major of organizational development.
So I can see what they're saying. I'm curious. I should probably watch this TED Talk of what they're talking about. Because I guess it also depends on like what type of school that you go to and how your creativity is fostered. Because I feel like there's certain aspects of memorization, but education, it should be a bunch of different parts to make the whole. And so there's different, there's art, there's recess, there's, different ways to be creative, but also,
there's also environmental factors. Like I went to Cheltenham High School, which was incredibly diverse. And I appreciate that experience because alternatively, where I went to undergrad was religiously diverse, but not as racially diverse. And I was happy that and that's something that's been an initiative, for Muhlenberg, and they're working on it, and they've made significant inroads since I was there. But I think that there's so many different aspects that go into how someone learns and grows, and it's important to not just have like cookie cutter.
I think it's also how folks operate, and
this is a whole you talked about having New Orleans for a whole season. This is a whole other season on its own, and I would love to bring in my friends Lauren and Laura, who are teachers, and get there. And oh my gosh, my friend Amy, that's so many teacher insights. Also, give all the teachers wine. If a teacher wants wine, give them wine. Also, if a medical professional wants wine, give them wine
after they're done with their shift.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it makes me think of, I went to, an upper middle class high school in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas. And so it was not a diverse setting. And so, that was one of the things I loved about coming to Drexel. But I was fortunate to be a part of a program that, as a young child, tested into this specifically like creativity program designed for 3rd through 6th graders, that once a week we would get bussed off to a different elementary school where they had classrooms set up, and you had a set classroom where like one day a week, it was just all creative exercises and like using that part of your brain that's supposed to be creative. And I loved it because you weren't doing the classic subjects. You were getting to do, that outside of the box thinking. And,
right. But fundamentally, I was part of I tested into, if your IQ is over a certain thing, you got to be in the challenge program, which actually I think that name is a little problematic, but it was, and then we got to do special field trips and all this other stuff. But then you're separating students who that should be offered to everyone. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's an incredible learning opportunity, growth opportunity, like mentally, personally, emotionally. Also, what are the dynamics of when you, and I am not an expert on this by any means, but when you separate students and there's one group that's getting one thing and the other one that's not getting another, how do you make sure it's equilibrium so that everyone is set up for success and is a place to grow? And it's multi-layered and incredibly, I find it like organizational dynamics as an entity fascinate me. That's probably why I'm also, my personal Instagram account may or may not be just a stan account for Adam Grant.
Which I did. My girlfriend works at Wharton. I was like, so how do I get to be best friends with them? And she's like, as soon as I achieve that, I'll let you know.
Oh my God. That is a game show I am interested in. Also Angela Duckworth and all of her work around grit. And it's just, we're very lucky being here in Philadelphia. There's your brain. I just love people's brains and what they have to say. I love it.
I agree. All right, well, let's jump into the next clip.
Should we jump back into the podcast? Should I talk about feeling optimistic with Meredith?
Of course. I did not get to listen to the episode, so do you want to give everyone a little rundown about what it covered?
Yeah, so it covered a couple things, including her businesses and her ventures and the Cicerone certifications. It also covered her event planning business. And, I took a couple things from it because I am new to Philadelphia, and she and MG are both pretty active in Philadelphia in general. And I share the love for beer. And I am a certified beer server through Cicerone, and I have been preparing for the next level for like 6 years now. So maybe one day I'll get to it. But so she explained the Cicerone program, which is kind of like a SOM program for wine, where you're learning all these different aspects of beer and how it applies to the service industry, as well as like pairing things with beer, like food and cheese. Cheese is really big in the Master Cicerone, which is the highest level. She also talked about beer and spirits education, how this person, Meredith, started her businesses as through college in her love for music. So finding a passion and then making it into a goal. Then she goes on to a lot of events that are happening or have happened in Philadelphia. So I learned about some festivals that are coming back. This says back for 2021, but when I was listening, I was looking it up, and it's also around for 2022. Philly Beer Week, pop-ups that she has. I think one of the festivals was Second Street Festival, which is like, it sounds like beer bands and artisans that kind of pop up in Northern Liberties, which is nearby me. So I actually added that to my calendar so that I could kind of go in and check that out. But I loved listening to this because she didn't have anything like spectacular happen. It was just, hey, I really like this. How can I do this for a living? And she worked herself super hard. It's like, all right, I'm going to book bands. Oh, I'm going to add beer into this. I want to get this certification and learn more. In order to do that, why don't I actually share that with my peers and my coworkers? I'll teach them and learn at the same time. You learn that theories of psychology and sociology. You can learn what you want for yourself by taking chances for yourself. And I feel like that ties into leadership because you're taking accountability, you're learning from yourself, you're recognizing what's going on, and you're able to read other people and make those steps for yourself. So it's kind of inspirational to like see things as opportunities, not just as something else to add to the calendar. Did you feel anything like that for your podcast? I know you said you liked it a lot.
I really did like my episode. I feel like a lot of these episodes that Beyond the Venue covers are tied back to some really important topics of being emotionally intelligent and knowing yourself. I know a lot of what my episode covered was knowing when to rest. And like, I feel like that's huge, and that needs to be huge in our society in America, because it's always like grind culture, and grind culture is so toxic.
It is.
Like, it's a way to be burnt out by the time you're 25 and not want to do anything with the rest of your life. And at least in my opinion, I feel like if we continue on this route of like, let's work, we're going to not be able to progress as a society much further, because all these creative ideas are going to go out the window. Yeah. And we're not going to be able to fulfill them. So, which I also have a really hard time doing for myself. Like, I will take a day to rest, and then I'll feel so upset that I'm like, I wasted a day When the day wasn't wasted, I needed to rest.
You need rest.
Like that's being productive, is knowing what you need to do and doing that for yourself, which was a big topic in this episode. That's been like one of my goals by the end of the year, to get more into journaling and kind of embed a mindfulness practice into my routine, whether that be daily, weekly, monthly, something to keep things a little bit more centered, because life is hectic and there's always a lot going on.
Lots to unpack in that final clip. Listeners, to give you a little bit of a backstory with the podcast that they're talking about, in order to get my students in kind of like a podcast headspace, I had them listen to, pick any episode they wanted, season 1 or 2 of Beyond the Venue podcast, and write a reflection paper on it. What are the talking points? What are, how does emotional intelligence show up? How does leadership show up? Connecting to what we talk about in class. And Liz, I had several students pick your episode. They absolutely loved it. Which, again, if you haven't listened to Liz from season 2, it's fantastic. But so, Liz, you're back into it. So when we recorded our season 2 episode, you weren't really traveling much. We were still kind of like coming out of it a little bit. And now your trips are starting to pick back up. So do you have any, boundaries you're setting for yourself with the amount of trips that you're going to take, or how are you approaching, kind of your travel schedule moving forward to make sure that you are preventing burnout?
Great question. I also think that I think a bunch of things, but I will say that and I know we discussed this at length in the last podcast, but for those that might not be familiar, traveling 80% of the time is bananas. And it is not something that I ever anticipate going back to, both personally and professionally. One, an outcome of COVID pandemic is that we have seen, I'm always a big proponent of, could this be an email? Does it have to be an email? And, right?
Preach.
But that being said, the same thing applies to, there are certain trips where, yes, it's necessary, but it's working smart and understanding. Also, in terms of boundaries, I really want to be mindful of when and how I'm traveling. Some trips that historically might have been quicker, like I want to compensate for, there have been challenges with airlines, knock on woods. None of my flights have been canceled yet. My next flight is 100% going to be canceled because I just said that. But I think that it's about building in that buffer time. And one of my takeaways, I mentioned this briefly before, is the pace in New Orleans. I don't think I could operate at that slow of a pace, but kind of taking, maybe take 3 breaths instead of 1. And just understanding, doing things like, and I think also as, not just as a woman, but in general to, New Orleans is not the same city that I visited in 2019. I definitely took more Ubers because there were times where if I was by myself, I wanted to be safe and I didn't want to be at night walking by myself. So I think it's about making sure you're comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that there are certain trips where it's taken the time to say, okay, historically, this would have been 4 trips. So how do we minimize this? Both for, one, a budget consideration, because everyone's budgets are, a lot of folks' budgets are tighter, but also time. Time is our most valuable resource. So, I'm in the process of the Brewtop Social, the concept that I created in partnership with Concessions International that's opening in Seattle in October. I've been developing a menu and building out all this other stuff for the concept as we're going through construction across the country. Because there's something that I don't need to be there to manage construction. Will I go out sooner to test some of the products that we're bringing in and engage with the staff? Of course, but it's something where we can also delegate with the team that's there. I can give them the right tools to do that. And then when I go out to visit, instead of having 2 or 3 trips that are, 1 or 2 days, I can maybe have 1 or 2 trips that are 3 to 4 days each to really maximize the time out there. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And it's
smarter,
also,
not harder.
Well, and I talk about my team strategically. Not, most of my team members, I have folks in New York, and, on the West Coast, I have, someone who's in Bend, Oregon. So it's like helpful to, have people, that are in different spots. Of someone in Boston. So it's helpful to say like, hey, if there's a project that we're working on, I don't have to run up to New England. Like I can delegate that to Kat or vice versa. So I think I see the value of meeting people in person, and I don't want to go one direction or the other. I think it's just finding balance and being open to just how you said you learned from the board game, like what worked and what didn't. I think a willingness to say, I don't have all the answers. You're never going to have all the answers. If somebody says they have all the answers, I would like their crystal ball, and but I also would like to give them a reality check simultaneously, because it's something we're all human, and we're only capable of so much. And I've admitted it on the last podcast. I'll admit it again. I am a work in progress. It is hard for me to shut off the computer. It is hard for me to shut off my email. It is hard for me to not check in with clients. I had one client who I called last week, and he was like, I thought you were going to try to take this last part as like a slight vacation. And I was like, that's cute.
Try being the operative word. So,
but I also talked to him for 15 minutes when historically our check-in call would have been an hour. So it's, progress, not perfection, right?
Love it. Well, Liz, I'm so glad that you were able to join me again today. This conversation has been amazing, and really glad that we were able to connect you with some insights that Caroline and Sarah were able to share. So I want to thank the listeners for joining us today. And before I forget, Liz, I wanted you to share with our listeners, you've got some events coming up, specifically Dumplings for All.
Yes, Dumplings for All is a food equity or an equity initiative that I put together with Judy Neve, Biology here in Philly during pandemic, to help serve and support nonprofit organizations that help give communities food and access to food. So National Dumpling Day is September 26th. We're still working out the details, but follow Dumplings for All with the number 4. On Instagram, we'll have details of that program, and of course, aligning with kind of personal and shared values. A lot of the organizations we work with that are creating the dumplings are women and minority-owned restaurants. Because the other thing too is so many things are dumplings. Bao is a dumpling, a pierogi is a dumpling, a ravioli is a dumpling, and I get very excited about that. So it's delicious, helps give back to the community. Highly encourage folks to check out the Instagram, and we'll share it on Experience Threee and on my personal Liz.Einhorn as well.
And we'll have it in the show notes for the episode. Well, Liz,
thank you.
Oh, of course. Well, Liz, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you to Sarah and Caroline for their insights. Follow, and listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Follow Beyond the Venue podcast on Instagram, and check us out on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms.
This is a Bivesta production.